This is In Studio. I'm Jay Daniels. Over the course of their own careers, many artists continually try to impart a piece of themselves within their music. For some, they are trying to discover their own sound within their work, such is the case for vocalist and composer Kristina Koller. Not too long ago, she released the album Perception, and right now she's working on the release of her next album, a continued journey down that path of discovery. Recently, Kristina and I met at St. Kilda Coffee in midtown Manhattan, where she shared with me her own story of enlightenment and discovery.
I didn't grow up listening to a lot of Motown and also a lot of classic rock. Actually, my dad recently found a video of me dancing to Tom Petty when I was 5 years old, so I got to put that up eventually. But I also did musical theater for like 8 years of my life, so that was a huge influence to me. I went to see musicals like all the time when it wasn't as expensive as it is now. And gradually I ended up starting to sing. I made my own rock band in high school, and then I was classically trained for a bit, and then I realized that I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to try something way different in college, so I went to school for jazz, and I learned about jazz.
Through your music, a lot of those early influences do come through. You previously released an EP. I believe it had 3 or 4 tracks on it. And now you've released your latest album not too long ago called Perception. And it's jazz standards with some originals, but when you listen, you hear those Motown, those R&B, and those soul influences. And it's not necessarily a new take, but it's your own take. Being one who is younger, obviously, it says a lot when someone in their mid-20s is taking songs from the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. Really, tell us about your own personal connection with this music. How is it that this music connects to you as not just a listener, but also an active performer?
Well, I think a lot of the music that I know of jazz is from musicals, and that definitely helped me get into jazz. But also, I'm one to pick songs specifically for me and what I go through in life, and I don't know. I really like songs that have weird harmonies or weird melodies, but also like I try to find songs that that could be current to society today. I don't want to pick a song that has like the word lovey-dovey in it or something silly like that, because nobody's going to relate to that. But like if a younger audience is listening to my music, I want to pick songs that can relate to a younger audience, even if they're from the 20s or 30s.
That is one very important point, is being able to connect with that younger audience. And what I'm finding very interesting right now in the world of jazz is that this is music this is not our music, so to speak. We did not grow up with this music. We did not make this music popular. And yet somehow or another, people my age and younger are falling in love with it all over again. How do you think it is then that this music, which is from yesteryear, is still relevant today?
Well, I think there's a lot of bands out there that are labeled jazz, that are trying to push the limits of the music and have people see it in a different light. Like Robert Glasper, Jason Lindner with Now Versus Now. Who else is there? Donnie McCaslin. Like all these musicians are still doing jazz, but they're doing their own thing to it and making it current and making it and evolving it. I mean, like Herbie Hancock and Chick Corea and even Miles Davis, they all evolved the music. They didn't just play like swing music. They had electronics and synthesizers and stuff like that. And I think that we need to keep creating, because there's so many things, so many different instruments out there in the world that you can create different textures with the music. And I feel like it's only our advantage that we can take those instruments and make something out of it.
Do you view your own voice as an instrument?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I also use a vocal pedal a lot of the times, and that like helps me with like doing like backup harmonies and like or like weird sounds like a megaphone effect and stuff like that. Like I really like creating different sounds and creating something more unique than what is actually like written on a sheet of music.
You speak of the evolution of the music. the evolution of instruments, so to speak. You've been involved in music as a performer since you were in school. And these are very different venues. You talk about classical music, being in an ensemble, musical theater, and now a soloist as a jazz vocalist. So how have you evolved as an artist through those experiences?
I mean, I think I always knew what I wanted to do with music. Like I always had this idea in my mind that I would want my music to have rock and like R&B influences in it. I just had to figure out a way to make it come out into the world, and it takes a while. You know, it takes a while for you to find your sound, and I think I'm finally getting there, slowly but surely. Like my next album is gonna come out this year, and there's like synthesizers, there's horns, there's a shredding guitar, and like it's way different than the first and the EP actually. But it, you know, I think since I've listened to so much alternative rock when I was in high school and like punk rock and all this, I listened to a lot of rock music when I was younger, and I think it's finally coming out into my music, and it's going into a direction that makes more sense to me than trying to do like a hip hop beat or something, because I don't know much about hip hop. I'm not gonna lie, and I love hip hop, but I wish I knew more about it. I didn't grow up listening to hip hop, so I don't want to try and do a genre of music that I don't know anything about. I don't know the history about. So I think rock music suits me the best, and R&B, Motown kind of vibe.
We're speaking with vocalist Kristina Koller, and her latest album is called Perception. As you have grown as an artist and as you have matured, what is the one thing that is still your greatest challenge, musically speaking?
There's a lot of challenges, not outside of me. It just, you know, but I think it's really finding the right fit for myself, like finding the right circumstances in terms of venues to perform at, of people knowing who I am, what I'm about. A lot of people don't understand what my music is, and I feel like a lot of, I don't want to like make it like a judgment call, but like I feel that a lot of people like in New York don't check out other people's albums and aren't curious about other people and what they do. And then you go to a jam session and people, I don't know, they think that you're gonna go up and you're gonna sing jazz, but you know, I don't know. I don't know if that makes any sense, because there's like a certain, I don't want to be like, there's a certain I feel like there's a clique sometimes, you know, there's cliques in the jazz scene, and I think I finally like have found my like home when I go to New Blue on Monday nights. Like that's the place that makes me feel like I finally found my place in New York.
It's more or less an extension of a family within jazz then.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is about the New Blue Jam session, it's not even jazz. Like what they do there is more innovative and more creative, and you don't go up and you play cover songs or jazz standards. You go up and you create on the spot, which I think is like really cool. And you know, they're great musicians. The guy that runs it plays in the Roots, and it's just, and everybody's so welcoming, and they don't judge you when you go up. Because I feel like a lot of jazz jams, they're very vibey, and they don't make you feel welcome, especially as a vocalist. Like when there's a vocalist up there, they don't even want to play.
Let me ask you a question. And I don't want to focus so much on challenges, struggles, but I think that we learn how to grow when we talk about it. As a 24-year-old female vocalist, what are the struggles that you're facing most when it comes to getting that exposure, getting people to listen to your music, and here in New York especially, getting people to come see you? I mean, what are the uphill battles that you face most in that regard?
Well, I think it's, you know, unfortunately today's society, like social media is so important. So I think the thing is like trying to figure out your image on social media is the most important thing as a musician. Well, one of the most important things, because if you like post certain things on Facebook or Instagram, and then you go and perform and it's not what you do, then people are gonna be like, what, you know? So I think the thing is like me trying to really like show people who I am. And like recently I've been like playing around with a synthesizer, and I just got a pedal when I was at NAMM in Los Angeles, and it's like a drum machine. So I've been like creating with that, and yet I'm not gonna perform. I'm not at that point where I could perform that solo gig yet, but I'm gonna work on that. But I also don't have. I guess like my website is like the best way to look at who I am and stuff, but I don't know. And I also feel that a lot of people, since I'm 24 and I'm a female, being a female in the jazz scene is annoying because like if you want to work with certain people and they're at a higher level than you, then they expect something from you a lot of the times, and it's discouraging because you want to work with certain people, but you don't want them to see you as an object, you know. You want to have mutual respect with people, and it's very hard to get that from a lot of people in the jazz scene, unfortunately. But that's just the music industry in general. It's so male dominated, so you can't really. It's not going to be fixed unless men start talking.
And it only takes one to get it started, you know. Your album is called Perception, and from listening to it, it was kind of defining who you are as a person, as a musician, but also offering a forward look as far as where you're wanting to go. So tell us about some of the songs. You picked a number of covers, some familiar, some not so, and then there are some originals on the album. So what is the whole story behind Perception? Why is it formatted from start to finish the way that it is?
You know, it took me so long to figure out that order. It's not easy creating an order for like songs when it comes to an album, because you can't think of it like as a set list in a way. You have to think of it as a conceptual thing. And I mean, Perception, it's about, you know, how I want people to figure out who I am. I don't want to be labeled as like a jazz vocalist. I want people to take the album and figure out what the music is. And it's interesting because a lot of people that have been listening to it say I sound like Sade. Then this band, the XX. I get like all these like interesting like people that I would never think I would sound like, and they say I sound like that. And then people are like, oh, is it smooth jazz? And I'm like, no, I don't want it to be labeled as smooth jazz, but like, you know, it's just, it's cool that people perceive it differently. That's why Perception. But also, it's also an album about how New York has been to me, and how I perceived things around me, and like all the relationships that I've been going through, and yeah, and then the next album coming out, Stronger, is gonna be like my breakthrough. Like now I'm stronger. I got my stuff together. I know what I want to do with my life. Like, and I've got, you know, I went home for 6 months to take a break from New York because I needed a break. Home is in Westchester, New York. But I know people are like, oh, that's not far. But I'm like, I didn't go and hang out at the clubs though for those 6 months. I took a break from the jazz scene. I needed a break from it. And when I was there, I realized who I was. I got back to my roots and realized what I wanted to do musically. I wrote a lot of music, and now this album's coming out, and it's Stronger. You know, like here I am, here I come.
And I don't want to use the word departure. It's not as though you're moving away from anything, but would you say that you're digging deeper into your own sound, trying to find your sound, your voice?
Yeah, and I think it's also me digging deeper inside myself to find who I am, and find, you know, that's really what it is. Like music, you know, it has to show who you are and what you're about, but you also have to relate to people. It's very important to relate to people, and I think a lot of the songs that I write and the songs that I pick are relatable to others. So
I was having a discussion with some folks recently about certain composers. And I said, why is it that this composer is not as well known as this? And they said, because that composer's music is not accessible. You don't want to have it dumbed down, but at the same time, you want it to relate, I suppose, to its lyric, but also the music. you can always relate to some segment of the population through your music, but if it's too terribly abstract, sometimes you've lost the audience, you know? How do you want to be able to connect, to be able to enhance the listening experience? What is it that you want people to take away when they hear your music, whether live or recorded?
I guess live and recorded, I want people to feel something, you know. I want people to understand and really take in what the songs are about and hear the lyrics. Live, you know, I'm thinking, I have like so many ideas in my head for live, because you got to think of your performance as a production. You're putting on a production. It's not just a performance. You're not just singing to an audience. I want to eventually like have like a visual artist working behind the band, like having like drawing artwork while we're performing, and there's a projector screen. I want to I want to create a vibe that people like want to come back to, continue coming back to, and every, you know, just, I don't know. I would like people to dance, because it, you know, eventually I think that's where my music's gonna head, is like people dancing and like actually like, you know, grooving to the music, not just sitting there watching a solo happen, you know.
So you're wanting a full experience, not just something where they listen, but you want them to participate.
Yeah, I mean, that's you know, that's how all these successful musicians make it. Playing these big stadiums, you have to have a whole production. You can't just think of it in a low scheme of things, like just playing at like a basement bar or something. You know, you got to think of it like you want to. If you want to pursue music, you should think of long term, and you should think of where you want to be ending up. You know, and I think having visuals and like really creating what you want is super important. You should have like, obviously the music's the most important part in how the music sounds, but if there's other concepts with it, it'll make it that more engaging.
Did you ever think that when you were younger, did you ever think in such a short time that you'd be playing venues like Birdland right here in New York? Did you ever think that's what you would be doing? I
mean, I didn't really, I don't know. I've always known that I wanted to do music. I never like, but I think for me, I would I love like performing at jazz clubs, but I want to perform at festivals. I really want to perform at festivals. Like that's the big thing for me, and I want to tour and I play around the world. And I love that New York has so many accessible clubs, and that it's so like this is the jazz capital of the world. There's nowhere else that has this many talented jazz musicians and this many like great jazz clubs. But I would love to be international. That's like the biggest goal for me. It's always been that.
Our guest on In Studio is vocalist and composer Kristina Koller. She'll be appearing at the Birdland Theater in New York on Wednesday, March 20th, and Thursday, March the 21st. More info on her tour date is available at KristinaKoller.net. Special thanks also to St. Kilda Coffee, just across from Birdland on West 44th Street, for allowing us to use their space for this interview. Until next time, I'm Jay Daniels, thanking you for joining us in studio.